Hi everyone. So if you're watching this video, it's because you are going to retake the exam on Unit 2. And hopefully this will help clarify any things you weren't sure about when you took the test. Now I know for our last exam, I looked at what standards you had the most trouble with, and I tried to give you an assignment based on that. And looking at this test, because as you know, the standards for this unit were sort of inconsistent and didn't match up the way we would have liked. The test wasn't even arranged by standards, more by 4 sections. So doing an assignment based on a standard didn't make sense. So I just thought it'd be best, I'm just going to review the stuff with you here, and hopefully this will clarify anything. So hopefully this is a good idea. And if you still are unsure of things after this, please let me know. Don't let it end here. And let me know what questions you have, and I'll make sure you feel more confident before you retake it. All right, so this unit was all about the new nation after the revolution. If you take out your study guide, right, a lot of this will match up with the study guide, so that may help you as well. So here's an image from the Constitutional Convention. Remember, the Constitutional Convention was where representatives of states went to modify the Articles of Confederation. But the Articles of Confederation was weak. It left the national government without significant power. So they went to Philadelphia to modify it. But as we know, they scrapped it and they started over. So there's GW. He was the president of the convention. You see Ben Franklin here. This was William Jackson, the incompetent secretary. You don't see Thomas Jefferson, right? All right, because he wasn't there. We're going to get that myth over by the end of this year. All right, so what I did here is I just sort of made a little page of everything, a little mind map of all this, and I also wrote out some main ideas on the right, whether you want to write it down or try to follow along. So we already discussed over here how the Articles of Confederation were a framework for a government, but they were weak and they lacked adequate power for a strong national government. So when the representatives went to Philadelphia, they ended up writing a whole new framework for a government, and that is our U.S. Constitution. So this Constitution was based on Enlightenment ideals, people we learned about last year, Montesquieu with the separation of powers and the branches of government, Locke, Rousseau with liberties and social contract. We can keep going. Voltaire, things like that. The Constitution is federalist because federalism means you divide power between the national government and individual states. Okay, so a lot of people were worried, a lot of anti-federalists were worried that the Constitution was going to diminish state power, and it did reduce it somewhat in order to strengthen the national government, but there still is state power worked into it. So that's federalism. A lot of the Constitution is based on representation. How will people be represented in their government? A lot of that is through the legislative branch, but that's not really the only way. 2 compromises made at the convention to help reflect how people will be represented is the Great Compromise, also known as the Connecticut Compromise. This is where they took the Virginia plan and the New Jersey plan and they sort of mixed it together and took this out. The Great Compromise asked for a bicameral legislature, which is a Senate and a House. Remember, the Senate is every state, regardless of how big or small, has 2 senators, and the House, some states like Alaska only has 1 representative, but some like New Jersey have 12 because our population's larger. So that's the Great Compromise, how people will be represented. And the 3/5 compromise, we learned about how slaves were basically considered 3/5 of a person and how that would affect representation, so that the slaveholding states of the South got more representation based on their slaves. So these two do deal with representation. Some of the reasons anti-federalists didn't like the Constitution is because they thought it took away states' rights, and they also thought because it lacked a Bill of Rights. Remember, the Bill of Rights wasn't added until after the Constitution was a thing. It was one of the first acts of Congress. They wanted a Bill of Rights to protect people's individual liberties. So the Federalists, in order to get the Constitution passed, said, okay, we're not a big fan of a Bill of Rights, but if that's what it takes, we'll add it after it passes. And they did. It was our first 10 amendments. Almost was 12, but remember 2 didn't pass. So in order for the Constitution to be modified, which doesn't mean the whole structure can change, but just to add things as necessary, the framers made a process to add amendments. And to add amendments, first 75% of the legislative branch has to approve it, and after that does, then it goes out to the states. So the Constitution also develops the 3 branches of our government: the legislative, judicial, and executive branch. Now, the judicial branch was sort of didn't seem like it was co-equal of these branches. Remember, Marbury versus Madison is what helped change that. It established the idea of judicial review, where the judicial branch could say if something violates the Constitution, right, the judicial branch could say so. So if Congress makes a law, for example, the judicial branch could say, no, that's unconstitutional. So what this did is it helped to make the judicial branch more equal with the other 2 branches. We also got into a little bit of GW's presidency, how he set the precedents for the presidents, focused a lot on the Whiskey Rebellion. And Washington's actions there, which of course were heavily influenced by Hamilton, showed that the national government can enforce laws. It strengthened the national government by their response. And remember, Washington set many precedents. I think the one on the test is the idea of establishing a cabinet. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say the president has to have this cabinet. But we know he established a Secretary of War, which is now called the Defense Secretary. Sounds so much nicer, right? The Secretary of the Treasury, the Secretary of State, and the Attorney General. So at that time, that was War was Knox, Treasury was Hamilton, State was Jefferson, and Attorney General was and then Randolph. But of course, these change. John Jay's an Attorney General. The cabinet didn't stay permanent, but just having a cabinet is what was an important precedent. Okay, if you have any questions, let me know. This should clear up any issues you may had. I pretty much just went through the test once again with you guys. All right, and I'll see you soon, and I'm sure we'll do much better. I need to stop this. Well, while I make it stop, let's think of some trivia questions. Who was George Washington's wife? You should know it was Martha Washington. There's actually a really good quote from Adams about how Washington would have been a nobody if it wasn't for Martha. Was it Adams who said it? I'll bring that up in another video. It's a pretty fun story. All right, goodbye.